Legendary Pokemon are supposed to be powerful by design, an overpowered new tool for the player as a reward for all the progress they've made in-game. Most legendary Pokemon live up to this hype, but sometimes legendary Pokemon kinda suck in competitive. Legendary status doesn't automatically make you good, unfortunately, and some of these legendaries can be very limited. Maybe their typing is exploitable, their move pool lacks key options, or they're just outclassed by other Pokemon who do the same thing better. Let's take a look at some of the worst legendary Pokemon of all time, and why they don't quite work competitively. But first, here's a Pokemon that doesn't suck. Furret. I am doing the unthinkable, folks. I will be live streaming a Furret-only Pokemon tournament this Thursday at 8 PM EST. 6v6 singles, Furret only. It's that simple. You'd be surprised how much variety can be found in a Furret-only metagame, believe me. The Furret Frenzy will have a 128 player cap. It'll be single elimination best of 3, and it'll take place in a Pokemon Showdown room of my own creation. Entry is first come, first serve on the day. Prepare your Furret teams and be there. The winner of this tournament will be allowed to request a Pokemon video of their choosing that I have to make, no matter how ridiculous. You don't want to miss this, folks. Be there for the event of the century. Thank you. Perhaps the most well-known example of a bad competitive legendary is Regigigas. Regigigas was introduced in the Generation 4 games, an all-new Reginald for players to take advantage of. The Regi trio back in Gen 3 are on the weaker side when it comes to legendary Pokemon as well, generally being ranked in the lower tiers, but Regigigas is by far the worst of all of them. This Pokemon has a simple normal typing and outstanding stats. This guy has one of the highest base stat totals in the whole game, but there's a catch, of course. Regigigas has the ability Slow Start, which exists as a deliberate handicap. For the first 5 turns that Regigigas switches in, its attack and speed stat are halved. Even though your other stats are unaffected, and this Pokemon has impressive bulk with great HP defense and special defense, Regigigas does not have a fantastic move pool to leverage all this bulk. It lacks immediate healing moves, hazards, and other utility options that bulky normal types like Clefable or Blissey do have. This is an interesting Pokemon design though, flavorful all around. Visually, it's reminiscent of the robots from Castle in the Sky, and Slow Start is fitting for such a Pokemon, like some kind of powerful ancient machine finally waking up after centuries. But having good flavor doesn't necessarily mean being good in competitive battles. The main game plan for Regigigas is to stall those 5 turns, waiting out the Slow Start, and being able to take advantage of your high speed and attack. But 5 turns is a long time. Other Pokemon could just spend those turns boosting up or doing other useful things, while Regigigas has to just pass and hope the enemy has nothing to threaten it. Regigigas at least has Thunder Wave, which is a good way to take advantage of its bulk that has a pretty significant impact, and it helps you stall out the Slow Start turns. With Thunder Wave and Substitute, and sometimes even Confuse Ray to try and get lucky to disrupt the enemy's turns, Regigigas can activate Slow Start, but it is a tall order. In Generation 4 UU, Regigigas can actually be used just for its defensive stats, ignoring the Slow Start completely and running utility moves. Mostly Thunder Wave and Knockoff. Although it lacks healing, these are pretty good moves. Clefable is a big competitor here who gets the same options and access to healing and Stealth Rock and way more utility, but Regigigas does have the advantage in its defensive stats, which are far superior. Fringe viability in Gen 4 UU would unfortunately be the peak of Regigigas in competitive singles, as in Gen 9 it is ranked all the way down in ZU, and I don't even think it's a very usable choice in that format. Regigigas does have some potential in doubles competitive, where there are mechanics that can overwrite Pokemon's abilities. The most obvious one is with Weezing or Galarian Weezing, who have neutralizing gas, disabling the effects of all abilities on the field. Obviously, disabling Regigigas' ability is very advantageous, and this has the added benefit of cancelling out advantageous abilities from your opponent. But this is often considered a bit of a gimmick, and is a pretty hard strategy to pull off effectively. Up next is Entei, the worst of the legendary beast trio. Suicune and Raikou are very good in the early generations, with solid roles in competitive singles, but that was never really true of Entei. Even in its debut generation, this is quite an average competitive Pokemon. Entei is a mono fire type with good attack, HP, and speed, but in practice this Pokemon struggles to achieve very much. In the early generations, before the physical special split, fire type attacks could only be special, so having good physical attack on a fire type was not a great fit. You could use Entei as a mixed attacker, relying on stab for that fire type damage and a respectable base 90 special attack, and hitting pretty hard with coverage options like hidden power fighting. But in the early games, Entei's physical coverage options are extremely limited. Maybe it would be usable if it got good physical moves like Earthquake or Rock Slide, but it just doesn't. The best bet for Entei is just to lean into its special attacking move pool, which is good, but its stats don't really support this move pool. And in Gen 2 it is outclassed by other fire types like Typhlosion and Moltres. In Gen 3, Entei is not much better. With Calm Mind, it can boost up its special attack and special defense, and substitute in the face of Blissey, living Seismic Toss behind a sub, but vulnerability to Dugtree or Earthquake is a big drawback that really restricts Entei's potential. It also doesn't help that there are so many new exciting fire types in Gen 3 that feel more useful than Entei. Arcanine is a non-legendary mono fire type that is just far better. It has the useful abilities Intimidate and Flash Fire, which are both great, and it even has access to Extreme Speed, a good physical option with some real merit that Entei does not get yet. Houndoom is superior, with its dark typing providing psychic immunity, its ability Flash Fire, and access to Stab Pursuit, as well as a higher special attack stat. And of course there's Moltres and Charizard who feel much better in Gen 3, and outclass Entei completely. Gen 4 may have seemed like a time for Entei to rise up, as the physical special split finally occurred, allowing Entei to actually use fire-type physical moves. But this generation also saw the debut of Stealth Rock, which punished all fire types significantly, absolutely destroying their HP bar every time they have the audacity to switch into the field. Gen 4 also saw the release of better and more exciting fire types like Heatran and Infernape, who are just more desirable than Entei all around. Gaining options like Extreme Speed and Sacred Fire over the years were not enough to keep up, and Entei has unfortunately just been an average Pokemon ever since its debut. This is a Pokemon design that never really knew what it wanted to do. A fire type with a high attack stat and no attacks to use. It was doomed to fail from the beginning, and any attempts to make it viable were too late. And finally we have a box legendary Pokemon. These are the highest power level Pokemon in the game generally. Pokemon like Kyogre and Mewtwo and Palkia, the best of the best. But there's one that stands out as pretty significantly worse than all the rest, and that is Zamazenta from Pokemon Shield. Zamazenta is the counterpart to Zacian, and the power disparity between these two Pokemon is maybe the greatest of any legendary duo we've ever seen. Zacian is absurdly strong, and in fact in its debut game it is banned from Ubers along with its crowned form. Zamazenta on the other hand is ranked in Uber, but it is hardly a viable choice in the format. Zamazenta does have excellent stats, befitting of a legendary Pokemon, but the design of this Pokemon is a bit strange. Zamazenta seems to be a defensive Pokemon primarily, with the ability Dauntless Shield, which grants a defense boost on switching. Zamazenta can achieve impressive bulk with this ability, but it can't really leverage that bulk for any meaningful advantage. Usually in competitive, defensive Pokemon want to take advantage of their bulk with good utility moves, entry hazards, healing moves, support moves like Wish or Heal Bell, status ailments to cripple the enemy, or moves like Knockoff that progress your game plan or U-turn to keep up momentum. You want to be able to do something and make a meaningful impact when you defensively switch in. But Zamazenta has none of these things at all. Instead, Zamazenta has a bunch of attacks. The Pokemon does have a good attack and speed stat, and it can operate decently as an offensive Pokemon, but I can't help but feel that the design of this Pokemon is a bit all over the place, and it doesn't really know what it wants to be. Even its offensive coverage options are kind of weird. It has close combat for a good stab option, but beyond that it gets Wild Charge for coverage, which is not ideal because of the recoil damage. Psychic Fangs is better than nothing, but Psychic is not the most desirable type in the world. It gets Ice Fang for ice coverage, but that's pretty low base power. If you're after a fast offensive threat in Ubers, there are way better options than this. In Generation 9, Zamazenta was nerfed, which it really didn't deserve, but it happened anyway. It makes sense that Zacian got nerfed. Zacian deserved it, but Zamazenta got caught in the crossfire for absolutely no reason. They cut its attack stat a bit, and nerfed the ability Dauntless Shield to only provide a temporary boost, where beforehand it was permanent. But Zamazenta did receive the new option of Body Press, a significant new tool that actually actually allowed it to take advantage of its defense in a way that made sense. Body Press is a fighting type attack that deals damage based on the user's defense stat instead of their attack stat. With the defense boost provided by Dauntless Shield and stab damage on this attack, it's a natural fit on Zamazenta. Following the nerfs, Zamazenta was tested out in OU. This is pretty rare for box legendaries. They're supposed to be a cut above in power level. So it says a lot that Zamazenta was even considered for this. And it ended up being completely fine for the metagame, actually. Zamazenta is currently ranked in OU, where it is a good Pokemon, but it's not the best Pokemon in the game. Regular old non-legendaries like King Gambit and Great Tusk have Zamazenta completely beat. The Iron Defense and Body Press set is very good, but also limited and can be stopped easily. Relying on fighting as your sole attacking type has its limitations. And the other attacking options that Zamazenta has are not even that hard hitting and are also quite limited. A viable spot in OU is not terrible compared to the other legendaries I've spoken about in this video so far, but considering that this is a flagship box legendary that is supposed to be on the level of its counterpart Zacian and others like Mewtwo and Kyogre, it is incredibly underpowered relative to them. And it goes to show that legendary level stats don't always result in a great competitive Pokemon. There are many other examples of legendary Pokemon that aren't the best competitively, but I thought I'd talk about just these three in today's video.